Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the mysteries of God's love and the powerful connections He creates between hearts. If this is your first time here, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now, because what we're about to unpack today is going to shift something in your spirit forever. Today we're talking about something that's been heavy on my heart, and I know it's been heavy on yours too. You said something. Maybe it was 3 words that changed everything. Maybe it was a confession that came from the deepest part of your soul. Maybe it was a promise that you meant with every fiber of your being. And now, someone hasn't been able to sleep since you said that. They're lying awake at night, replaying your words over and over, feeling their heart race every time they remember the sound of your voice. Listen to me carefully. This isn't just about romance. This is about the supernatural power that God has placed in your words when they come from a pure heart. This is about understanding that when you speak truth, when you speak love, when you speak life into someone's existence, you're partnering with the Creator Himself. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 18:21 that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Your words have power. Your declarations have authority. Your love confessions have the ability to shift atmospheres and change destinies. But here's what most people don't understand. When you speak from a place of authentic love, you're not just affecting the person you're speaking to, you're stepping into your divine calling as a carrier of God's heart. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you 8 powerful truths about what happens when your words carry the weight of heaven. I'm going to show you why someone can't sleep since you said what you said, and how God is using your voice to write love stories that will echo into eternity. This isn't about manipulation or control. This is about understanding the sacred responsibility that comes with speaking life into another soul. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why your words have been haunting someone's dreams in the most beautiful way possible. So grab your journal, open your heart, and let's dive into the mystery of what God does when His children dare to speak love with authority. Don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started on this journey together. Number 1. Your words carry the DNA of heaven. When you spoke those words that have someone losing sleep, you weren't just speaking from your human heart. You were speaking from the place where God's love meets your spirit. Every person who has been created in the image of God carries within them the capacity to speak words that literally change molecular structure, shift atmospheres, and unlock destinies. Scientists have proven that sound waves have the power to restructure water, and considering that the human body is roughly 60% water, imagine what your love-filled words are doing to the very cells of the person you spoke to. But this goes deeper than science. This is spiritual warfare at its finest. When you declared your love, when you made that promise, when you spoke that truth over someone's life, you were literally downloading heaven's perspective into their earthly reality. The enemy has been whispering lies into their ears for years, telling them they're not worthy of love, that they'll never find their person, that they're too broken to be chosen. Then you came along with your God breath, words, and shattered every lie in one conversation. That's why they can't sleep. Their spirit is trying to process the reality that someone sees them the way God sees them. Your words didn't just express your feelings, they became a prophetic declaration over their life. When you said what you said, you were actually agreeing with heaven's opinion about who they are and what they deserve. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 55:11 that God's word does not return void, but accomplishes what He sends it to do. Your words, when they flow from a heart that's connected to God's heart, carry that same supernatural power. You literally spoke their value into existence in a way they had never heard before. Think about this. God spoke the entire universe into existence with words. He said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. He said, "Let there be," and everything that exists came into being. Through the power of His spoken word, you are made in His image, which means you carry that same creative power in your voice. When you told them you loved them, when you painted the picture of the future you see with them, when you called out the gold in their character that others have overlooked, you were literally participating in the ongoing creation that God is doing in their life. That's why their sleep has been interrupted. Their spirit knows that something shifted in the realm of the spirit when you spoke. They're not just processing emotions, they're processing a divine encounter. Your words became the voice of God, speaking love, acceptance, and destiny over their life. And just like when God speaks, creation responds. Their heart is responding. Their mind is responding. Their very soul is responding to the truth that was released through your lips. This is why you must be so careful with your words. Beloved, you're not just sharing your feelings, you're releasing spiritual authority. You're not just expressing love, you're making declarations that have the power to bind and loose in heavenly places. That person lying awake at night isn't just thinking about you. They're encountering the God who loves them through the words you spoke. Number 2, you awakened. Their divine assignment. The reason someone hasn't been able to sleep since you said what you said isn't just because they're infatuated with you. It's because your words awakened something in their spirit that has been dormant for years. Every person on this earth has a divine assignment, a purpose that God wrote into their DNA before the foundation of the world. But sometimes that assignment gets buried under layers of rejection, disappointment, and the world's definition of who they should be. Your words didn't just express love, they called forth their true identity. When you spoke life into them, when you saw them for who they really are beneath all the masks and walls, you literally activated their divine assignment. That's why they can't rest. Their spirit is vibrating at a frequency it hasn't experienced since they were children. When they still believed they could change the world, you reminded them that they are fearfully and wonderfully made. You showed them through your words that someone can see their potential, their calling, their destiny, and now their soul is on fire with possibility. This is exactly what happened when Jesus called his disciples. He didn't just say, "Follow me." He spoke their identity into existence. He called Simon Peter, which means rock. Long before Peter displayed any rock-like qualities, he spoke prophetically into who they would become, not just who they were in that moment. Your words did the same thing. When you declared your love, when you painted the vision of your future together, when you spoke with authority about who they are and what they're capable of, you became the voice of heaven calling them into their next season. That's terrifying and exciting all at the same time. They're losing sleep because their comfort zone is being shattered. They're realizing that maybe they don't have to settle for mediocrity in love or in life. Your words have become a mirror reflecting back the image of God that lives inside them. For the first time in a long time, they're seeing themselves through eyes of love instead of eyes of judgment. They're hearing their name called with tenderness instead of criticism. They're experiencing what it feels like to be chosen, pursued, and valued for exactly who they are. This awakening is causing a holy disruption in their life. Suddenly, the job that felt like a prison doesn't seem permanent anymore. The dreams they buried years ago are starting to resurrect. The voice that told them they would never be enough is being silenced by the voice that says they are more than enough. Your words became the catalyst for their transformation. You spoke, and something that was asleep in their spirit woke up. They're not just losing sleep because they love you, they're losing sleep because they're falling in love with the version of themselves that your words revealed. They're discovering that they are capable of being loved well. They're learning that they don't have to perform or pretend to be worthy of affection. Your authentic words created a safe space for their authentic self to emerge. And that authentic self has dreams, has vision, has purpose that has been waiting for someone to speak it into existence. You didn't just confess your feelings, you prophesied their future. You didn't just share your heart, you unlocked theirs. The sleepless nights aren't torture, they're labor pains. Something new is being birthed in their life because of the words you spoke. And they know that there's no going back to who they were before you said what you said. Number 3, your vulnerability created sacred space. The words you spoke that are keeping someone awake at night didn't just communicate information. They created sacred space between two souls that had been guarded for far too long. Vulnerability is the language of heaven. It's how God speaks to us, raw, honest, without pretense or performance. When you chose to be vulnerable in that moment, when you let your guard down and spoke from the depths of your heart, you weren't just sharing your feelings, you were modeling what love looks like when it's unafraid. That person can't sleep because they've never experienced the safety that comes from someone else's radical honesty. Your vulnerability gave them permission to be vulnerable too. For the first time in years, maybe decades, they felt safe enough to let someone see behind the masks they wear to protect themselves from rejection and judgment. The world has taught us to play games, to be strategic, to never show all our cards at once. But you shattered those rules with your courage to speak truth. When you said what you said, you created a sanctuary where pretense dies and authenticity can flourish. That's why they're lying awake replaying your words. They're not just processing what you said, they're marveling at the fact that someone actually said it. In a world full of surface-level conversations and guarded hearts, your words cut through the noise like a sword of truth. You showed them what it looks like when someone loves without reservation. You demonstrated what happens when fear takes a back seat to faith. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for someone else to be vulnerable first, but you had the courage to go first. You jumped into the deep end of authentic connection and invited them to join you there. The Bible tells us in 1 John 4:18 that perfect love casts out fear. Your words weren't just an expression of love, they were a demonstration of perfect love in action. Love that isn't afraid of rejection. Love that isn't concerned with timing or appropriateness. Love that speaks truth even when the outcome is uncertain. This kind of love is so rare that when someone encounters it, it literally rewires their understanding of what's possible in relationship. They can't sleep because they're trying to comprehend that someone actually loves them enough to risk everything by speaking truth. Your vulnerability didn't just touch their heart, it healed their heart. Every person who has lived on this earth for more than a few years has experienced the pain of being rejected for who they really are. Most people learn to hide their true selves to avoid that pain. But your radical honesty created a space where hiding wasn't necessary. Your words said, I see you, all of you, and I choose you, all of you. That level of acceptance is what every human soul craves but rarely experiences. You didn't just tell them you loved them, you showed them what being loved looks like. You didn't just share your feelings, you created a template for how love behaves when it's operating from a place of wholeness rather than need. The sleepless nights are happening because their soul is trying to integrate this new reality. They're learning that love doesn't have to be earned through performance. They're discovering that acceptance doesn't require perfection. They're realizing that someone can see their flaws and still choose to stay. Your vulnerability became the key that unlocked years of self-protection. Your honesty became the medicine that healed years of rejection wounds. Your courage to speak truth became the invitation they needed to start believing in love again. Number 4, you spoke their secret language. Every person has a secret language. Words, phrases, expressions that unlock something deep in their soul and make them feel truly seen and understood. Most people spend their entire lives hoping someone will learn to speak their language fluently. When you said what you said, you didn't just communicate love, you spoke their secret language with supernatural precision. That's why they can't sleep. You somehow found the exact words that their heart has been longing to hear for years. You spoke to parts of them that they thought were invisible to the rest of the world. This isn't coincidence. This is divine orchestration. God has been preparing you to speak life into this specific person's heart, and He gave you the vocabulary to do it effectively. When you spoke, their spirit recognized the voice of someone who had been trained by heaven to love them well. Think about how Jesus spoke to people. He didn't use generic, one-size-fits-all expressions of love. He spoke to the Samaritan woman differently than He spoke to Nicodemus. He addressed Zacchaeus differently than He addressed the rich young ruler. Jesus understood that every heart has its own unique combination that unlocks its deepest. Places your words were that unique combination for the person who can't sleep. You didn't just say the right things, you said their things, the specific words that their wounded heart needed to hear, the particular promises that their insecure soul needed to receive, that the exact declarations that their weary spirit needed to believe. This is why generic love confessions don't have the same power. Anyone can say I love you, but it takes someone who has been given divine insight to say I love you in a way that reaches the places where they've hidden their deepest longings. You spoke to their dreams, you spoke to their fears, you spoke to the parts of them that they thought were too damaged or too different to be loved. When you opened your mouth, heaven opened its vocabulary and gave you access to the words that would unlock their heart completely. They're losing sleep because someone finally spoke their language fluently, and they can't believe it's real. For years they've felt misunderstood, overlooked, like they were speaking a foreign language in a world that couldn't comprehend their heart. Then you came along and not only understood their language but spoke it back to them with native-level fluency. Your words didn't just communicate love, they communicated understanding. They didn't just express feelings, they expressed revelation about who they are at the core of their being. You saw past their representative, past their performance, past their protection mechanisms, and spoke directly to their authentic self. That authentic self has been hiding for so long, waiting for someone who could see them and love what they saw. Your words found them in their hiding place and called them out into the light. The reason they're replaying your words over and over isn't because they're trying to decode them. It's because they're trying to believe them. Their mind is having trouble accepting that someone finally gets them. Their heart is struggling to receive the truth that they are truly seen and truly loved for who they actually are. But their spirit knows truth when it hears it, and their spirit is responding to the authenticity of your words. You didn't just speak to them, you spoke for them. You gave voice to things they felt but never been able to articulate. You expressed truths about them that they've known deep down, but never heard reflected back from another person. Your words became a mirror that showed them their own beauty, their own worth, their own value through the eyes of someone who loves them completely. Number 5. You interrupted their resignation to settling. The person who hasn't been able to sleep since you said what you said had made peace with settling. For less than their heart's desire, they had convinced themselves that the kind of love they dreamed about only existed in movies and fairy tales. They had resigned themselves to relationships that were comfortable but not compelling, safe but not spectacular. Then you opened your mouth and shattered every compromise they had made with mediocrity. Your words didn't just express love, they expressed the kind of love that their soul had been crying out for, but their mind had deemed impossible. They can't sleep because you've disrupted their carefully constructed walls of low expectations. For years, maybe decades, they've been telling themselves that they're asking for too much. That passionate, all-consuming, soul-deep love is for other people, not for them. That they should be grateful for whatever crumbs of affection come their way. Your words came like a wrecking ball to that entire belief system. You didn't just say you loved them, you said it with a conviction that made settling seem like an insult to their value. You didn't just express feelings, you painted a picture of what love looks like when it's operating at full capacity. They're losing sleep because their spirit is at war with their practicality. Everything they thought they knew about what they could expect from love has been challenged by the authority in your voice. The way you spoke to them, looked at them, saw them, valued them, it all contradicted the lie that they should lower their standards to increase their chances of being chosen. Your words became a prophetic declaration over their love life that said you don't have to settle, you were created for something extraordinary. This is exactly what happens when God sends someone to interrupt our resignation to less than his best. He uses people like you to wake up people, like them from the slumber of settling. The Israelites had gotten comfortable in Egypt, even though it was slavery. It was familiar, predictable, safe in its own twisted way. Then God sent Moses with words that disrupted their comfort with bondage. Your words are doing the same thing. They're calling this person out of their Egypt of emotional settling into their promised land of authentic, passionate, all-consuming love. But Exodus is never comfortable. That's why they can't sleep. Their spirit is ready to move towards something better, but their mind is terrified of leaving the familiar territory of relationships that require nothing of them. Your words have awakened a hunger for more that they had successfully suppressed for years. They had made peace with surface-level connection. They had adjusted to love that felt more like friendship with benefits. They had convinced themselves that butterflies were for teenagers, and that mature love was supposed to be predictable and calm. Then you spoke words that made their soul catch fire again. You reminded them what it feels like when someone doesn't just love you, but is captivated by you. You showed them the difference between being chosen by default and being pursued with intention. The sleepless nights are happening because they're processing a choice they thought they'd never have to make. Do they stay in the comfort of their current situation, or do they step into the unknown territory of a love that actually makes their heart race? Your words didn't just offer them relationship, they offered them resurrection. Resurrection of dreams they thought were dead. Resurrection of standards they thought were unrealistic. Resurrection of the version of themselves that believes they deserve to be loved with passion, intensity, and complete devotion. They're not losing sleep because they're confused about what you said. They're losing sleep because they know exactly what you meant. And it's everything their heart has been longing for, but their mind convinced them they couldn't have. Number 6. You became the voice of their unspoken prayers. That person lying awake at night replaying your words isn't just processing what you said to them. They're marveling at the fact that you somehow gave voice to prayers they've been praying in secret for years. Every lonely night, every disappointed relationship, every moment of wondering if they would ever be truly understood and completely loved. They've been sending silent prayers into the atmosphere, asking God to send someone who would see them, choose them, and love them without reservation. Your words didn't just express your feelings, they became the answer to prayers they thought God hadn't heard. This is why they can't rest out. Their spirit recognizes that what happened between you two wasn't just a human conversation, it was a divine appointment orchestrated by heaven itself. When you spoke, you weren't just sharing your heart, you were speaking the very words that God wanted them to hear through your voice. The Bible tells us in Romans 8:26 that the Holy Spirit intercedes for us with groanings that cannot be uttered. Sometimes those groanings get translated into the words that come out of people who love us. Your words became the tangible expression of God's love for them that they've been desperately needing to experience. For years they've been wondering if anyone could ever love them the way they dream of being loved. They've questioned whether they're too much or not enough. They've wondered if their standards are too high or if they're destined to spend their life alone rather than settling for someone who doesn't truly appreciate who they are. Then you spoke words that sounded like the voice of God responding to every insecurity, every doubt, every fear they've ever whispered in prayer. You didn't just tell them you loved them, you told them you loved them in exactly the way they'd been asking God to send someone to love them. This kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. God has been preparing you to be the answer to their prayers just as much as He's been preparing their heart to receive what you have to offer. Your words carried supernatural authority because they were heaven's response to earth's cry. They can't sleep because they're processing the reality that God actually heard their prayers and actually cares enough about their heart to send someone who would speak their love language fluently. Every specific thing you said to them matched up with specific things they've been asking God for. The way you see their beauty matches how they've been praying someone would see them. The way you value their heart matches how they've been asking to be valued. The way you speak about the future matches the dreams they've been afraid to say out loud. Your words became confirmation that their prayers weren't falling on deaf ears. They became proof that God is intimately aware of the desires of their heart and actively working to fulfill them. The sleepless nights are worship services. They're lying therein. Amazement that the God of the universe cares enough about their love life to orchestrate conversations that heal years of wondering if they matter. They're overwhelmed by the goodness of a God who would use your voice to speak directly to their deepest longings. Your words didn't just touch their heart, they revealed God's heart for them. They didn't just express human love, they demonstrated divine love working through human vessels. This is why the impact of what you said goes so much deeper than romance. You became a messenger of hope to someone who had almost given up on the possibility of being truly known and completely loved. You became the voice of heaven speaking destiny over their love life. You became the answer to prayers they were afraid to believe God would actually answer. They're not just falling in love with you, they're falling in love with the version of themselves that your words revealed. They're discovering that they are worthy of the kind of love they've been praying for. They're learning that their standards weren't too high, they were exactly right for what God had planned for their life. Number 7, you've shattered their timeline of healing. The reason someone hasn't been able to sleep since you said what you said is because your words accomplished in one conversation what years of therapy, self-help books, and personal development couldn't do. You spoke healing into wounds they thought would take a lifetime to recover from. Your voice became medicine to parts of their heart that they had written off as permanently damaged. In one moment of authentic connection, you shattered their timeline of healing and catapulted them into a version of themselves they didn't think they'd ever become. This isn't just about the power of love. This is about the supernatural authority that God gives to words spoken from a pure heart by someone who has learned to see people the way heaven sees them. When you opened your mouth, you weren't just expressing feelings. You were releasing healing frequencies that reached into the deep places where their pain had been stored for years. That person is lying awake at night because their entire internal landscape is being reconstructed. Wounds that they thought would always ache are suddenly painless. Fears that used to paralyze them are losing their power. Insecurities that used to define their self-image are being replaced by the truth of who they are through your eyes. Your words didn't just comfort them, they healed them. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 16:24 that gracious words are like honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Your words were surgical instruments in the hands of the great physician, cutting away lies and suturing truth into the places that had been bleeding for far too long. They can't sleep because they're trying to process the reality that they feel more whole after one conversation with you than they have in years of trying to fix themselves. For so long, they've been carrying the weight of past rejections, betrayals, and disappointments. They've been defined by what others did to them rather than by who God created them to be. Then you spoke words that bypassed all their defense mechanisms and went straight to the core of their identity. You didn't just see their potential, you spoke to it with such authority that it had no choice but to respond. Your words became the voice of truth, drowning out the voice of condemnation that has been their constant companion. They're losing sleep because their spirit is celebrating freedom that their mind is still trying to comprehend. Years of shame are being washed away by the acceptance in your voice. Decades of believing they're too damaged to be loved completely are being shattered by the conviction in your words. The timeline they had accepted for their healing journey has been completely disrupted by the supernatural acceleration that happened when you spoke life into their dead places. This is exactly what Jesus did everywhere he went. People who had been sick for years were instantly made whole by his words. People who had been tormented by demons for decades were set free in moments. People who had been outcasts their entire lives were suddenly welcomed into the family of God. Your words carried that same healing power because they came from the same source. When you love someone with the love of God, when you speak to them with the voice of heaven, when you see them through the eyes of their Creator, miraculous things happen. The person who can't sleep isn't just processing romantic feelings. They're processing a divine encounter that reset their entire understanding of their worth, their value, and their potential. They're discovering that they don't have to spend the rest of their life recovering from their past because your words created a new starting point for their story. The sleepless nights are labor pains as a new version of themselves is being born. The version that believes they deserve love. The version that knows they have something valuable to offer. The version that isn't afraid to be vulnerable because they've experienced what it feels like to be completely accepted. Your words didn't just heal their wounds, they gave birth to their destiny. You didn't just express love, you released them into their next season of life. Number 8, you spoke their future into existence. The words you said that of someone losing sleep weren't just about the present moment, they were prophetic declarations about a future that their faith hadn't been strong enough to believe in until you spoke it out loud. Every word you said became a seed planted in the soil of their imagination. And now those seeds are growing into a vision of what their life could look like when it's lived in partnership with someone who truly sees them, values them, and chooses them completely. They can't sleep because their spirit is trying to process the magnitude of the future you painted with your words. For years, they've been living with a small vision of what their love life could be. They've been planning for settling, preparing for disappointment, bracing themselves for another relationship that would require them to shrink or perform or pretend. Then you opened your mouth and spoke possibilities into existence that they didn't even know they were allowed to dream about. Your words weren't just promises, they were prophecies. You didn't just describe your feelings, you declared your intentions. You didn't just express what is, you spoke about what will be with such authority that their faith had no choice but to rise up and agree with heaven's plan for their life. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 29-11 that God's thoughts toward us are thoughts of peace and not evil, to give us a future and a hope. Your words became the voice of God, speaking that future and hope into reality through human lips that have learned to partner with heaven's agenda. They're lying awake at night because you spoke their destiny out loud before they even knew they had one. You saw their potential and called it forth with such conviction that dormant dreams started waking up from years of slumber. You looked past their current circumstances and spoke to the version of themselves that God has been preparing them to become. This is why your words carried such power. You weren't just speaking to who they are right now. You were speaking to who they're becoming, who they were created to be, who they will be when they step fully into their calling as someone's beloved. Your words became the invitation they needed to start living like someone who deserves extraordinary love rather than someone who should be grateful for whatever comes their way. The future you spoke into existence wasn't just about romance. It was about them stepping into the fullness of who God created them to be. When you spoke about loving them, protecting them, choosing them, you were actually speaking their identity as someone worthy of being loved, protected, and chosen. When you painted pictures of your life together, you were helping them see themselves as someone who brings value to relationship, rather than someone who's lucky to be included. When you spoke with such certainty about your commitment, you were teaching them what it sounds like when someone chooses them not because they have to, but because they want to. The sleepless nights are happening because their entire future is being rewritten by the authority in your voice. Plans they had made based on low expectations are being replaced by visions that match the size of God's heart for their life. Dreams they had buried under years of disappointment are being resurrected by the hope in your words. The small story they had written for their love life is being replaced by an epic that matches their true value and calling. Your words didn't just create romantic excitement. They created expectation for a love story that will reflect the heart of God and demonstrate His goodness to everyone who witnesses it. They can't sleep because they're trying to wrap their mind around the possibility that their love story could be one that makes people believe in love again. That their relationship could be evidence that God still writes fairy tales for His children, who are brave enough to believe that they deserve them. Your prophetic words over their life have set spiritual forces in motion that are working to bring that future into reality. What you spoke is already being established in the heavenly realm, and now it's just a matter of time before it manifests in the earthly realm. They're losing sleep because their spirit knows that everything changed the moment you spoke their future into existence with such faith and authority. Beautiful souls, if someone hasn't been able to sleep since you said what you said, don't minimize the power of what happened in that moment. You didn't just have a conversation, you participated in a divine encounter that shifted something in the realm of the spirit. Your words carried the DNA of heaven, awakened divine assignments, created sacred space, spoke secret languages, interrupted resignation to settling, became the voice of unspoken prayers, shattered timelines of healing, and spoke futures into existence. That's not just human love, that's supernatural love, working through human vessels who have learned to partner with God's heart for His children. If you've been the one losing sleep because of words someone spoke over your life, receive them as the gift from heaven that they are. Let those words heal what needs to be healed. Let them call forth what needs to be awakened. Let them give you permission to believe that you deserve the kind of love that makes your heart race and your spirit soar. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started on this journey of understanding how God uses love to transform lives and write stories that echo into eternity. Your love story matters. Your words matter. You matter. And heaven is cheering for the love story that's being written through your courage to speak truth. Choose vulnerability and love without reservation. Sleep well knowing that when your words come from a heart that's connected to God's heart, they have the power to change everything.